All right. This is a special one for me. I'm super happy to have you on, Christine.
Thank you.
There's
I'm
so
excited.
much, there's so much I want to talk with you about. And I I initially met you because you had reached out to me, I think after the Aubrey Marcus interview I did to talk about doing some appearances with a bunch of people that you're connected to. And in the conversation, I got to know you just a little bit. And I was like, damn, you're quite interesting. Like there's a lot going on in your life in a really unusually complex way. It's very coherent, but it takes a little while to kind of feel the through line through it, right? And there's still something mysterious in there. And and then you told me about a book that you were basically had written the first draft of, and you were so kind as to let me read it. And so I have been, and I was just telling you, my brain has the hardest time paying attention to novels. I seem to only be able to read kind of like intense philosophy books and kind of funny that way. But this, I had no problem. In fact, it was so gripping. And I think because, and I want to talk with you about this, but I think it's precisely because there's some through line that's being communicated through that whole book, right? That there's so many different contradictions being laid out at once that seems to communicate something that is silent throughout, but some kind of inaudible but salient feeling of something opening up that really puts you in the presence of your experience in the reader. Like I felt like I could totally get everything that you were saying and all the different contradictions inside, right? And how beautifully you just laid them all out. Like you didn't explain them away. You didn't like you really left it up to me about what my opinion was going to be about your mother and about you and about what you did. You just like laid everything out about your life, and you've had an intense life. So there's so many things that in questions I have for you, right, about what's happening in that book and where you came from and what planet you come from or what planets you come from and your relationship with your mother and your
Mm.
profession. But let's start off with, just if you could, just so people have some context, just kind of like at a professional level, like what do you do and all that.
Sure. Well, thank you. And I was telling you before that I'm just really excited to get feedback on the book because it's my life and it's so close to my soul. And so it's all fresh off the printer. So this is really exciting. Thank you.
And you
And yeah.
is this your first book you've attempted to write?
I wrote another book about 20 years ago, but like didn't do much with it and never published it, had it published. So yeah, but writing's always been, I feel like we're born with different creative gifts. And so writing was one of mine that I've always been really passionate about. And so it was exciting to do this. And
And
yeah,
you're talking to
professionally.
honestly some big publishers too about it. So you're
Well, I'd love to show anyone that's open to reading it because it's a big ask to ask someone to read a book. And so,
yeah.
but yeah, I grew up in NorCal right near you and had, yeah, just a crazy, turbulent, chaotic childhood with some consistent things, which was love, it's mostly from my mother and also resilience and fighter spirit. So I really went after it in my career, but still treated it all as like Alice in Wonderland because I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life, and somehow ended up in the world of wrestling.
Yeah.
And I'm an executive
Professional
at
wrestling, right?
WWE.
Yeah.
And I've been there for 23 years, and I'm so grateful to WWE for so many reasons, mostly that it's just taught me so many things. And so, but meanwhile, I'm also this not really closet spiritual person,
Mhm.
but I am extremely most interested in anything that is the mystery of the spirit and that mysterious thread you were talking about, the through line.
I loved how your voice just changed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is, where I'm always wanting to lean in. So this book, I had a really mystical, magical mother who was so spiritual and so out there, but also this really successful businesswoman and an idol and best friend to me my whole life, and so many adventures. And but on the eve of her death, she was crossing back and forth across the veils, and I was with her, obviously witnessing this like astounding channel of information that was coming through.
Where she'd
like die and come back to life and be like, oh my God, this and that about the afterlife. And also like, this is how we can resolve a lot of these darker things that happened in your childhood. And also how we can connect when I pass.
Yeah.
And so she gave me this toolbox that night of how I could build this new relationship with her. And it still like makes me emotional because it's an ever unfolding relationship. But this was, like 7 years ago. And so I have created this amazing, magical, holy shit.
Real relationship with her.
Connection and relationship
ongoing.
With my mom. It changed my life. Totally. Yeah. And so that's really what the book's about.
So just real quick before we dive into that, because I know that there's probably some people thinking who are not familiar with professional wrestling, hearing what you just said, going, "Wait a minute, she's a wrestler? She doesn't look like a wrestler." So if you could just a little bit more, what do you do in professional wrestling? Because you don't occur as somebody who's involved in that. Like, what's your role in that and stuff like that?
So I work at WWE, and my role is, I kind of grew up there. And so I did casting for them and some producing. And then I realized like there was a real lack in Los Angeles of a WWE presence.
Yeah.
And so I went to the Vince McMahon and the team there and pitched to start a division that like books celebrities to promote their movies on our shows and puts talent on TV shows and award shows as presenters. And so that's my division. And now I run, this West Coast pop culture division for WWE. It's super fun. And like every day is like no other. And
because professional wrestling
is a wrestle
thing.
I can't like reference the stories, but I have taken wrestling bumps before. I may not have been sober, but but I don't wrestle. Totally. It's called a bump when you fall.
Right. So it's interesting because my sense with you about that is, in some way you don't quite totally fit there. But you somehow, and you talk a little bit about this in your book, but you've somehow, your particular way of not totally fitting there, you made a niche for yourself and created an opportunity, right? To, you could say, bring in, because I mean, one of the things about professional wrestling, which is it's really interesting if you start thinking about, if you let go of all your prejudice of your kind of cartoon version of what professional wrestling is, and you start thinking about it, it's actually, I would say it's the closest thing that we have to ancient theater, right? It's not the current modern theater of kind of like the erudite kind of thing. No, there's something, it's about the people that go and they invest in and project their lives onto these characters that act them out, and there's millions of people. And now with social media, these wrestlers are like little hubs where billions of people put their eyes. And so you're in a position where you have like a lot of eyes, and not necessarily eyes that are super, super evolved, but So in some sense, you get to take some of these more complex, deeper, like, or higher content in people, right? And get to bring them into that world such that people can start to see other possibilities, right? That wouldn't maybe normally see that. So you're also kind of a little bit of like an undercover agent, it seems. Is that fair?
It is fair where I really feel like I do remind the talent all the time about the being, we talk about this in the book all the time, like all through the book, that we're made of energy, and every day it's really like, what kind of energy do we want to channel? And like, pay attention to where our energy is going. And so for superhuman talent that hit millions of people, wrestling is so much more than wrestling. It's like it's paralleling a lot of the extreme emotions of life and the highs and lows and good guys and bad guys, and it really allows families to come together and be so present and like full of passion for these larger than life shows. And yeah, the talent, I really do work to just continue reminding the talent of the beam of power that they are,
Yeah. Yeah.
for people, especially right now. And the fan base is just, it's people of all ages going through these times right now in life. And there's an unspoken language that we can send to people through our energy field as well, that, I like to think for the most part, WWE sends a message of like, we can get through this, and like,
Totally.
we got this, we're not going to put up with this shit, but
Totally.
yeah, I do really understand the current of it and how powerful it is. And I try and I work on a cellular level with that, if that makes sense.
Totally. Totally. I get it. Like, and also what it took to understand the current of that, from completely not being in the current of that and finding yourself in the current of that. I mean, you talk about in the book that like you made lots of mistakes and you had brilliant people around you that like encouraged you to make mistakes and learn from them. And there's a whole world. I just really get the sense that to be in that current was almost an initiative, like a multi-layered initiatory process.
Totally. I mean, I really believe that like our souls choose some of the, lessons that were, like my mom said in the book. And I feel like part of what I came in to choose this life to learn is resilience and just like grittiness and endurance, because even from my childhood, that frequency sort of was a similar frequency to what I've dealt with through most of my life. And WWE, there's been so many great memories, but there's been some really obviously hard memories as well that I'm the most grateful for. And I always tell my team, like, WWE's made me ninja. I just couldn't get that degree from anywhere else.
Yeah.
From all the like grit, just it's not even like hard work. It's hard work, but there's way more even to that.
Yeah.
And that's not just WWE, that's anyone who is putting a full commitment into like their job and being grateful too of all the gifts, even the hard ones that they're getting from their job,
Right. Well, I would bet just even the grit it takes to be ready to be that concentrated of a dramatic, all the things that must go into a meet and a show, and like they just probably have to pump themselves up and like be completely what they are. I mean, I'm just imagining that probably chains back to like the administration part of it, all the way into the planning part of the ideas. I could just imagine that grittiness, a certain tonos through that whole thing that is probably, I probably have no idea what that's actually like, what the experience is actually like. So, but I do get the sense that you've gone through kind of an initiation in order to be in that flow with with
Yeah.
those guys.
And it's not a formal initiation.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
just sort of like
exactly.
you one day go, wait, I'm not that scared anymore.
Totally.
That's when I feel initiated.
Totally. Totally. Yes. Yes. It would, but in fact, if it was formal, it'd be a lot clearer and easier, but that it's not.
Yeah,
Right.
totally scared. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I get scared, but yeah,
Yeah.
not that scared.
And so there's also some through, I know, and I know out of this journey with your mom, right? And the things that came up, your life really became, at least my reading of it really became about deeply about service.
Hmm.
Like I really, and I kind of got that from you the moment I first met you. Like I get the sense that there's just a deeply devotional heart inside of you that's really tuned into service. And I know you told stories of like I was so struck by that, giving, like spending 5 years giving making spaghetti for the homeless, and that whole ride, and how you came about that, and what that must have taken every day, like every week, to get up and go make that drive and like deal with all the stuff that came up and all the beautiful things. But like there's something about what I think I get about you is, and I got this right away just in your way of being, right? That on one hand, you're super creative, right? Like you're super creative, like even in your motions, like you are not linear at all, right? But you're very industrious, and that is not a common combination. Like a lot of times, people who are really creative most often are not very like necessarily industrious, or they're not very what is the other one of the big five, uh the like the conscientious, right? The ones that are about responsibility. But you seem to be high in conscientiousness and creativity, and the creativity can be really, really chaotic, but the conscientiousness and the industriousness like seem to kind of ground you and help you have your career, and so you actually produce stuff and create things and make it happen, right? I want to commend you for that, but also highlight the unusual creature we're talking to here.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I get service in general. I just feel like it is the key to making people happy. Like, if you want to be happy, you got to serve people and serve yourself. And not crazy, like don't break your back. Even the spaghetti thing, I'm like, oh, what the hell was that? But
Yeah.
that was a lot of work. And it just seemed like, why am I doing this? Because it didn't seem like it was helping any problem, but it did do something. But that said, I just feel like
Totally.
I don't want to stop your flow about me. No. Just kidding.
Well,
No.
yeah, totally. I just wanted to kind of highlight the things that I've just been getting from you, and then just hearing more about your life through your book. Like a lot of it just makes sense. I appreciate the thing about service. Hey, hello. That's so cool.
Sorry about that.
That was not a blooper at all. That's a feature.
Yeah, it's my son on Saturday morning.
Awesome. That's awesome. I'm glad he made a little appearance. So as I was going to say, like, I've often thought this, like having one is a real complicated thing, right? But giving away the self is an extraordinary thing. Keeping a self and having it and maintaining it, it's really kind of heavy sometimes. But giving it away, pouring the self into the world, is like the most ecstatic thing in the world. And I get that that's been a big part of your life, is like pouring your life into things and watching them bloom and watching them blossom. Yeah.
I do
I-
love that.
And a lot of that. So you grew up in an environment, right, that was quite complicated and had a lot of extremes in it, and a lot of traumatic kinds of extremes. Like, say a little bit about where you grew up and kind of what the setting was, and with your parents and you, and yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in the 70s. So it was just a lot of people trying to reclaim their freedom, which my mom was working on, and my dad, poor thing, was just so gripped with the control of his own past that he got lost. And so my dad,
What kind of
okay, I want to start by saying that I really do believe, and my mom taught me this, that we do choose our parents.
Hmm.
And this life, I just wanted to go hard, and so I did. And there's my dad is just, I'm a dichotomy, which is really apparent in the book. And my dad is just a huge dichotomy. He has so much darkness
Hmm.
and so much light. But he was just really young when he had us. And there was just my mom and dad were just a crazy combination of just not just,
Yeah.
and so yeah, there was a lot of just abuse and yelling and scary stuff, and then
That
they
was
got
kind of a
divorced when I was
rager, and
five.
could be your dad could be a rager and a yeller.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And also can be great.
Yeah, he can be great. And it's like, yeah, it's very compartmentalized.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. So I think that's probably the hardest part to write about and talk about in the book, because it's so like dark and exposing and vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But and that's probably like the part that will be the hardest to kind of feel like I'm capable of getting out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were some really dark things that happened in childhood. And then my mom and I moved out when I was 5, and she was just trying to survive. She was like 29
Yeah.
and hadn't really worked. And so I just sort of got passed around with different neighbors. And my mom was kind of like Pollyanna, rose-colored glasses, and trusted everybody. And there was just a lot of just confusion and invasion and
Yeah.
um
Totally. So like a lot of um like neglectful behavior, right? Like,
yeah, I think it was neglectful.
and there's also kind of that part of with your mom. And what's interesting about this is like one of the contradictions, and one of the ways that I think that the book's really effective, right, is you lay out these things that are amazing about your mom, right? And also that are completely Pollyanna and like spiritual bypassing, like through the roof, right? And these horrific things like neglect and different things that she did, right? That she could probably, I mean, she could be arrested if it was today, this kind of stuff, right? And it's interesting, you laying those things out in switching back in terms of time, right? Because a lot of the book in the beginning is about you sitting on her deathbed and going back and forth with time, and you're laying out all of these aspects of her, right? And the impact on you, right? And so you're getting these extreme hits, right? That are going on, that is your life, right? And for me, as I was experiencing that, and it's that it afforded this, what I would say, this through line through all of it, that kind of, in some sense, went through all of it, but transcended all of it, that you couldn't put into words. And it was similar to, like, I think I texted you about this. It was similar to reading it, was like having this emerging sense of like a door opening in the periphery of my vision. And then looking at it, and it would go back to the periphery of my vision. But there was like an opening of some kind, of some, I don't know, some truth, something that couldn't quite be put into words, but kept getting more and more salient, that all of those contradictions seem to evoke or make possible this silent through line through all of it. And that really held through the whole book. And that was the experiential part. That's the part that kind of felt like I was with you in every single step of that. And I just want to say, I just appreciate, man, have you had to deal with some contradictions in yourself and outside of yourself that ended up inhabiting inside of yourself, right? There's, I'm like, I feel like I want to kind of bow at your feet, in a sense of like, right? Like bow to to the things that you've had to confront, right?
Oh.
And do it while cultivating this ongoing relationship with the person, right? Like a very high level relationship with the person that was involved in a lot of that contradictions in yourself that have been really painful. All of that going on at once. Like, yeah.
Thanks. It's like fucking complicated life.
Complicated. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I just, what helps me so much is just always remembering that at the end of the day, like, I actually am not even really in control of anything.
Yeah.
And there really is this higher force, and I don't have to figure it all out. But yeah, like integrating and processing and healing all those different dichotomies.
Yeah.
It's been the biggest learning curve ever, but also just like the hardest challenge and all that for me has been like being able to activate like joy on a regular basis. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't get depressed. I get more like robotic, I think, where I just go into like autopilot.
Yeah.
But my work right now and for the rest of my life is really like rewiring like full on into joy and bliss.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is very much your mom's message, right?
I feel like she, has been a huge part of that. And I really do have this new relationship with her where I'm like, and it's not like base, it's not like, oh, mom, like I can hear you, mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's more like through this back door, the window, but I know it's like something bigger is happening. There's so many signs and examples of that. And that's the whole point of me writing this whole thing, wasn't to like share my life. It was to really open people's minds that the hardest thing I bet for most people in life is losing someone they love dearly to the hands of death. And we've never really, as a collective, put in our teachings that like we could actually have a new relationship that's super powerful with our loved one on the other side, because they're in a source of power that they can we can exchange energy, that they can help us in life, and we can stay connected to them in death.
Yeah. And what's interesting is your mom on her deathbed, right, laid out the context of that relation with you and her. That was so amazing. You talked about, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that, this experience of her kind of going out, like, and coming back. And it started, I believe, didn't she say all right, I'm gonna die here soon. Like,
Yeah.
come with your computer. Ask me any question you want.
Mhm. Yeah, my mom, well, she also moved to Oregon because she knew she was going to die in a few years and she knew she could get assisted death if needed there. And so she was like, she was just so done. And
Yeah,
so, yeah, she called me and knew she was good. She wanted to die on the new moon.
right.
And so she would have morphine assisted. But yeah, it was kind of like she was a portal at that point because she was like right on the veil. And it was part of our contract to like kind of tie up a lot of these loose ends, but also for her to instill in me like this is just the beginning of a new chapter for us.
Yeah,
And the
yeah,
biggest thing was that she told me that I was going to be getting like downloads, like electricity around my head about what I would be stepping into next, that I had a much bigger purpose to help the world in a really big way. And yeah, these two other businesses were downloaded to me through this process
wow.
that are in the book, but and they are kind of like the second mountain. I'll always do. I'm always going to be at WWE. I'm a staple there, and you'd have to kind of kill me to make me leave. But I have these other passion projects that also I'm invested in that
And
kind of came.
what are they called? What is it?
Um, One is called Journey 8,
Mhm.
and it's basically a studio that makes empowerment content based on like people's stories of overcoming, like what they went through and how they overcame something.
Yeah,
Journey 8. And then Hero's Journey is a curriculum in schools
hmm,
that helps. It's like TED Talks for kids,
yeah,
but it gives kids these soul tools to help them build this talk about something they deeply care about.
right.
But those were, and that, this is where I sound weird and crazy, but those were like channeled through this process that my mom told me about on the eve of her death, of
Yeah,
how I was going to get new insights about things that I would do.
yeah, yeah, totally. I just the thing that was really interesting for me, and I think made this it afforded me to open up to everything you were saying, right? Because I'm not very woo woo myself, but like there was something about as you were talking about that, like as woo woo as it got, it was that it's like that it was clearly such a personal battle to sit there with your mom on her deathbed, having all of these memories starting to come up, right? And like simultaneously kind of deal with her loss, but also her proactively like wanting you to ask questions. And the questions, honestly, that were open for you was like, why did you do this? Why did you leave me with like a homeless woman? Why did you, right? Like, why did you smoke, right? All the way up to on the ventilator, she's still smoking cigarettes. Like, why? All these really like intensely, so much of what was going on for you were these emotions that were these incomplete question marks, very hurtful, like involving a lot of pain, right? And you're so open about that in the book, and it was so clearly you could feel the visceral sense of sitting in your chair with your computer talking to your mom. You can feel all of those things, right? So
Mhm.
it wasn't like you were sitting there in some kind of new age trance or something, right? No, you were actually like brought your whole life there, the real stuff that everyone has, right? About these incompletions with their parents, right? These kind of sense of betrayals. And she was an invitation for you to ask about all those things. And so, in the midst of that real conversation, opened up all the things that she's telling you about the way that you guys are going to relate when she dies and what that takes for you. So it's like it's I think what it was, and I've been impressed by this, is my experience a lot with kind of woo-woo people is it just looks like a lot of like a spiritual bypassing, right? It doesn't look real. It's missing a depth, and it just seems like a distraction. This, something else is going on here. This is there's a reality to this relation that's so deep, right? And you do not mince any of the contradictions within your mother in the book. Like you don't paint her in some positive Pollyannic light, which I'm sure maybe some part of her would want that, right? Like at least she would want to see herself.
I've been like writing things and I'm like, ha ha ha, mom, like karma, like
yeah.
I feel like we've had a laugh, my mom and I, about this. So
yeah. Totally. So that experience, if you could just share a little bit about, I mean, I laid some context for it, but like what happened? So she knew that she was going to die, and she specifically called you into the hospital, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was my daughter's birthday. And so she called me on my daughter's birthday and said, you're going to have to come up tonight because I'm probably going to go. And so, yeah, my mom and I are like forever eternal soulmates. Like we're so connected. So it wasn't even like a question of me being the one who was there with her on the eve.
Yeah.
No one else was to come. It was just to be her and I. And but yeah, I knew there was one point that I like knew that a lot of this was gonna be unsettled.
Yeah.
And the solace for me was knowing that I didn't think my mom, her body was gonna die, but I knew that the energy and the essence of my mom was gonna transcend into a different place that could help me heal from these things that were really kicked up. I mean, truly, since she died, I've done so much deep ass soul searching, like deeper times 100 than I ever did before she died, on those specific like themes and things that happened in my childhood, like, and deep dark, like on the
really
floor,
confronting darkness.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, like I was even listening to Aubrey and Blue talking about Blue's darkness retreat that she just did for 4 days, and Aubrey's, and I'm like, might as well, I mean, it's just
totally
follow it.
Right.
The healing never ends. It's like ever.
Yeah.
But I do think it gets richer,
Yeah. Totally. It gets richer. And so when you were driving over there and heading into the hospital, like what were you feeling? Like as you were going towards the hospital, like what were you feeling? Were you feeling grief? Were you feeling anticipation?
Like totally numb.
Yeah.
And weird. Yeah.
Numb. Weird.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah.
When you feel like you're like floating up here, and then you're saying to yourself, you're never going to forget that. You better live it up. You better take in everything.
But everything's kind of like far away, strangely familiar, but foreign. Yeah, that kind of.
I was
weird.
Pregnant at, 43 with just finding out 8-10 weeks pregnant too. So I was like in that really heinous phase.
You weren't expecting that. It was an unexpected.
No, I was.
And you hadn't told your mom yet either.
I hadn't told my mom.
Yeah.
My brother had just died as well. Like, there were so many layers that night. It was like the spirits in the room, right? Totally. My brother, my baby, my mom, like.
Yeah. There was even that part where you had to leave on your child's birthday, right? Even that was kind of part of it, right? And had to kind of like hold center.
So much mysticism through the whole thing. though. And that's where that's where I'm always like, yes, there's just some greater force it's just what it is. Because there's so much mysticism, even like that I was throwing my daughter's birthday party the next day at Mother's Beach. It just, there was so much like that showed me this is what's happening right now. And I'm not even in control at all. Because if you feel like you're in control of anything, you just get mad at yourself.
Right. Totally.
Like,
and so you're numb and feel that kind of existential weirdness going on, a sense of this is a crucial, so many things coming together. And then you go in the elevator and you get off and you go in and take us inside of, like, so you walk in the room and what do you feel and what do you see?
I mean, my mom is just such a like vivacious, full of life person. And so it was just, she was done. Like when death is close, it's a different thing. Cause it's like it's like a thickness of energy.
Yeah.
So I was literally like, oh, this is death. Like, this is so interesting. This is a feeling of death.
Yeah.
It's just so crazy.
So you walk in and you're kind of hit with that. You're hit with that.
But my mom's so funny. She'll like open her eyes and she just calls it. Like, she'll just be like, I know, I look like death. Or she was always so funny.
Yeah.
I think.
And then
yeah.
And specifically, she asked you to come and ask questions. And you came with your computer.
Mostly because she was getting information and she was like, yeah, just let's take advantage of this. That was totally my mom. She'd like find a treasure box and say, let's really take advantage of this. So she knew that she was able to like channel information. She didn't really have an agenda except to be kind of my guide.
Yeah.
Through an inquisition.
So it's kind of like she in character. So just some context, like this about her, that because you've gone on, she's gotten psychic hits and taking you to Britain, to castles, and had these amazing experiences, realizing all kinds of different things. So you had definite context of that. If there's a generous outpouring of multidimensional kind of knowledge, she's going to be on it, right? And so here she is on her deathbed, right? And in character, she's like, I'm going back and forth between the other side, and I'm getting all of this information. Mm-hmm. And so you walk in, but at the same time, like, here's like one of your best friends that are going to die. Right.
I mean, I feel like that was kind of life with my mom anyway. So it wasn't like walking in and being like, oh my God, she's channeling. Like my mom was channeling my whole life. She was always like, she was in and out of, this was just a more extreme version. But in one sentence, she'd be like, oh, my nails, and then she'd be like, oh my God, this epiphany. And then, so it was actually like a comedy.
That's just normal. Right. That's just
totally. That's normal.
Yeah.
She talked to this guide my whole life named Lewis, was her guardian angel. Lewis was part of our family. And she would always say like, oh, Lewis told me that, you should wear your rain boots today or whatever. It was always like information coming from Lewis.
And he was always right about
Lewis wants, he
right
said, you should be careful of your friend that you've been hanging out with, meanwhile, it's like smoking cigarettes behind the gym with that friend or whatever, like it was like, Lewis was kind of scary because he was really right.
Yeah. He was right, always right about the weather. And he was the one that was never very good about judging your mom's relationships, right?
Yeah.
The one thing he was not good at.
I wasn't really wanting to listen to Lewis on that.
Right.
Me and Lewis were usually right about
right.
her men.
Totally.
She just didn't want to hear it.
And so you sit down, and so that's on one level, it's just you're with your mom, she's being the way she is all all of her life. It's just more probably a little bit more extreme. And you sit down and you have your computer and you're prepared to take notes. And what was that like? What unfolded from there?
I mean, I think we just skipped around between past, present, future of
Yeah.
my mom, and it was like all over the place, our conversation. And but I felt really complete actually, even though I knew there was so much incomplete.
Mhm.
But yeah, we it was so interesting because my mom was really clear about what was going to happen to her now that she was transitioning into death, and like the process of that, which
Yeah.
was so interesting to me.
Yeah.
And the process of souls. And she was getting information that, you know, not everybody goes to the same place when we die. There's different dimensions. And it's not like just because you were Mother Teresa, you're going to the highest dimension. You know, it's really about um, the momentum of like, yeah, just like your life and your heart's work, and that would depend on, she had this quote that she would say like, um karma, life is like the little ball that you put in a slingshot, and your karma is the momentum to which it goes flying into the afterlife.
Yeah. I think most people could relate
So
to that. Yeah.
yeah, but she also was like, but it's also like there's not really a hell. Hell is just what we go into the afterlife with our distorted thinking, and we can come tangled up in our distortions
Yeah. Yeah.
and be like in purgatory, or we can evolve into the truth of
Yeah.
our sovereignty.
Yeah.
And so she was sharing like all this kind of information that was just mind blowing.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, and thank you for seeing that, because even hearing your feedback, I'm like, oh, that's so interesting that it was perceived that way. But I don't think I realized how interesting the afterlife stuff was, because I was so focused on like trying to get answers on the past.
Yeah. Totally.
So, like there was a whole grade of my life that I didn't remember because it was so dark.
Right.
She didn't remember either. And I'd like been wanting to ask her about that freaking grade,
Yeah.
second grade, for my whole adult life. And she was like, I don't really remember either, you know?
Right.
And she didn't really remember the bathtub incident. You know, my dad
Yeah.
tried to drown my mom in front of me in the bathtub, like attempted to drown her.
Right.
Um,
Right.
when I was like 4. And that was probably the biggest trauma I've ever had by
Yeah.
far. Like that still to this day haunts me, to where I'm like,
It's one of those images that it's right.
yeah. And it's a vivid image. And people might argue, oh, you know, what you remember at 4. And but you know, my whole family knows what happened, and I do remember it. And except for my dad, of course, doesn't remember that it happened. But regardless, my mom was kind of like, I don't really remember that. Like I barely remember. You know,
Totally.
she shut it out too.
So like
But then I also feel like my mom protected me from a lot of things. And because she told my niece about the bathtub incident and that it happened and that he tried to drown her. But she would like never talk to me about it,
yeah.
my mom. So
Yeah.
it was very layered.
Yeah. Very layered and really complicated. And I really had a lot of the sense I really felt you a lot, like in that when you wrote about it, right? Of just sitting there being like, there's these blank spots in your life, like the ones that you're talking about. And essentially what I heard you say is like they weren't, they were blank in like what happened, but they weren't blank in terms of feeling states that would just haunt you, right? But like, you know, appreciated too this the experiences that you were having, which was like you'd get these, you'd be haunted, right, by feeling states that were kind of like memories, but you didn't know what would happen, like what happened actually, and you'd be struck by them, right, in this way. And I can really relate to that. Like I too, my insane background, like I like at 4 or 5 years old was timing when I would cry when my dad was in a blackout beating my mom because I knew that he was going to kill her, and then breaking up the energy and kind of saving her life. And some of those images are just like it still makes my stomach flip flop, right? In some way. So I can really relate to some of the feeling tones and some of those experiences and how just intense they are, right? And also that experience of a mood and being vulnerable to certain states that can just hit you. Like that's the thing about these things, which it's like there's one thing that which there's the experience of the state, but then there's a like imagine living a life where something like that could happen, right? And there's an anticipation that in it, at some point some darkness can come into my soul and just have its way with me. That kind of stuff attunes the way you are, right? The way life occurs, right? And so you come in, you come in and there's all these questions that you have, and your mom's on her deathbed, right? And you can feel this tension in that conversation where on one level, she's wanting to give you these downloads and you want to hear them and you want to honor her because it's her deathbed. But you also have real tough questions that you know are really hard for her to look at. And you asked some questions of her, which I was so impressed that you did, right? Like about the smoking and taking responsibility for smoking, right? About these incidences that she was implicated in her, at least in her avoidance of dealing with the situation, all these things. It would have been really easy, I think, to just shove all that stuff down and then just focus on her last moment and give that to her. But it struck me as courageous to actually take the invitation that she gave you to answer whatever questions that you had. So it's like, I really appreciated that about what you wrote. And then about you. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's it like just to hear me articulate that to you?
You know, it's like, first of all, I feel like it's so healing to write about these things, or for anyone even to journal about these things, like, so because you have to like look at it that way and it's really laid out in front of you, and you just realize like, oh my. But then, and you saw this as a through line in the book too, the theme of forgiveness is so important. And also the theme of realizing like, and this is not coming from spiritual bypass.
Yeah.
The theme of like realizing like there are so many gifts and overcoming, but you have to like overcome it. You can't just go, oh, I got through that and I shoved it down and now I have all these other problems that I'm hiding. But you get a lot of gifts in going through those dark things. The thing that's the most challenging, I think, for like people like you and me who've been through really intense trauma at young ages, is it's just so unnatural to like learn that kind of level of fear and terror at such a young age. And it gets like trapped in your beingness.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, you have terrors about certain things in life, and you're like, where is this coming from? Like, why am I so terrified of this thing happening? Well, it's from that core thing, you know, and that's why I loved, and I definitely don't recommend plant medicine for everybody, because I don't think it is for everybody, but for me specifically, like the ayahuasca
Yeah.
really made me
Really.
face that bathtub thing. And I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Right.
dismantle that now, but
Right.
it is lodged in there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but those developmental years are like so freaking important for these kids to feel safe,
Yeah.
period. And
Yeah.
then when you put the kids in danger for the most part through neglect and abuse and all these other, drinking and alcoholism, we don't have much of a shot after that into adulthood. You just better hope and pray that, right, our spirit is like committed enough to take the high road, because it's so easy to go just stay dark.
Totally. It's because I think,
But
is it,
there's so much reward.
yeah.
Do
And
take
and
the
to get
high.
there, and to get
The
that
context and the
reward. Yeah.
contrast. Mhm.
It seems to me that like people, I think one of if you get down to it, it seems to me that going through all that stuff at such a young age, where basically the 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 thing that your nervous system is designed to have to be the walls of the womb of your childhood, right? Your parents, your caregivers, right? As Wincott would call your holding environment, because people don't think about this a lot, but like human infants are the most vulnerable things in the cosmos, literally, right? But who grows up to be on top of the food chain? Human beings, right? There's this, and the difference that makes that difference, right, is the holding of the womb, right, in the mother's belly, and then the childhood. So when you have all these breakdowns and loss of support, you do not, you get this. I would say, I've noticed this in myself, and I've noticed in all the people that have kind of gone through these kinds of things, is what becomes in question is like a fundamental sense of okayness is always in question, right? Because there are people I've noticed who grew up in environments where they're held appropriately and, right, let go, where they kind of have this fundamental basic trust, like
Mhm.
that like it's all right, they're okay, like no matter what happens, like even if it doesn't go right, like fundamentally okayness isn't at stake in the matter. And you can appreciate what that affords is like, if that's the case, people can really open up to the world, because a sense of okayness isn't at stake. But I know that for me, that's been the continual thing I have when I've jumped into these dark places, right? And what's healed, the result of that healing, is this background sense of things are okay has started to develop in me. And as it has, it's transformed my relationship to the world, right? Because less and less of me is like trying to make sure that all the things and stuff is in order such that I can actually know that I can exist without it hurting so bad.
Mhm. Yeah. And I like that, like a general sense of okayness, because
Mhm.
I feel like like Joe Rogan once said that he works so hard and is an overachiever because that shitty critic guy is like always 50 feet behind him and he always has to stay ahead of him.
Right,
And
right.
that really that but that's and so I feel like for me, like, and what I'm so grateful to my mom at the end of the day and not mad at her,
Mhm.
is that she always gave me a magical narration about the divinity
Yeah.
that is running through all of us and that is unseen and seen. And she was always like,
She sung
this
that
is
through your
what's
whole life.
in charge,
Yeah.
is the divinity of things. And it can be super beautiful, but it doesn't mean we're not going to suffer. But and that is what has always been my general sense of okayness. It's like I'm one of those people, if I'm not doing some sort of like spiritual routine every day, I'm like people who get mad at when they don't go to the gym. I get really mad at myself if I'm not, because I have to invoke
Yeah.
that like I'm gonna
Consciously.
channel that today versus like these
Yeah.
like crazy trauma thoughts that are running loops in my head. And
Oh, yeah.
why I think the gates in the book, I don't know if you've gotten to like to the part where after she died, I had a dream that her and my brother were like, you're gonna go through these different gates.
Mhm.
And it wasn't a literal dream, but anyway, the gates were really important. And I feel like that has come from this like channeled place too.
Yeah.
And one of them was about invoking divinity.
Yeah.
Um, because we can invoke whatever part like frequency we want every day. And so, and if we're more intentional with it, like what I was saying before about
Yeah.
committing to joy and love, and it's harder sometimes if you've been wired into darkness at childhood, you really have to like work a little bit harder sometimes to get
Totally. Yeah.
wired into, but you can make it like a conscious part of your day to have a spiritual routine and just kind of like root into divinity and invoke divinity, and that you're
Yeah.
channeling that
Because
helps magnetize joy back to you.
you said one of your teachers was called, is it Dr. Joe? What's his last name?
The friends at Dr. Joe. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's
Amazing.
it seems like that was a real like deep that was really helpful in so many ways, I would imagine, because he works real neurobiologically. He's a doctor,
Dr. Joe
does
is
meditation.
brilliant. Yeah. But what he also does is he marries science to his teachings. And so, um, yeah, he studies a lot of brains according to the work that he's doing and tweaks the meditations according to what the studies are. And
Yeah.
so he has this incredible methodology and teaching and training about really how to like transform into, a new, improved part of ourselves. He's amazing, Dr.
Right.
Joe.
I got that sense as you were talking about in the book that in some sense he's his work and his meditations that he does affords this real concrete kind of bodily way of, in some sense, rewiring, if you will, right? Of what could have been wired correctly, let's say if you're a kid, but if they're all wonked up, right? Like being able to actually contact some of the same physiology, right, and move it over in the right direction. But I think one of the things that you're communicating right now really well, and you communicate in the book, is that this notion of like really having an ecology of practices that are crucial, right? And all the meditations that you've done, and all you go through a bunch of the different forms of healing work that you've done, right? And my sense is all of them had something to do, right, with really looking at and confronting what was difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
and some of them had in such a way that like it had a horizon of healing. I'm confronting what is difficult, not to dwell in what's difficult, to actually
Yeah.
move through it, right? And
You have to look at the shadow, and the shadow
yeah,
sometimes looks so unexpected. The shadow sometimes can show up at 3:30, 4 in the morning when I'm deep in a breathwork process, and it's like a really ugly, scary ass demon that is right there in my face. And it's like, what is this weird image, but oh, it's part of shadow. Like, what is behind this? And what,
yeah,
like, there's certain times where shadow, and people, yeah, you can do two choices with that. You can say, never, I'm not going to confront this, or I'm going to confront this in a safer place than right in this moment, or I can confront this right in this moment.
yes.
um but
Depending.
yeah, I've found like that it is so important to do the shadow work, and really rewarding too. And you don't have to be a masochist about it.
Right,
It just comes up
right,
sometimes, like
right.
waves and tides and
Yeah,
dark and light.
yeah, yeah. And your
Um,
mom, And your mom's
But the
been right
routines,
there.
yeah, really help. Huh?
So with your mom, what were some of the things that she told you that the way that she was going to keep, like the way to keep in relationship with her when she died? Because she was moving back and forth and then coming back to
Yeah.
information, right? Dying and then coming back to life and sharing what she saw. What were some of the things that she said that, like, what needed to happen for you guys to have an ongoing relationship? Because one of the things that was really clear that struck me was that it wouldn't just happen. It would need your permission and your evocation, right? And your participation, right? But it was really, there were some really clear things that she said.
Yeah, I mean, I love this, and I think this will help people. But some of the things that she said are, in the everything is frequency and vibration, and it's magnetic energy, and it has to line up. That's very Abraham, and
Right.
my mom taught me that my whole life. And so when she was going to cross over, she would be in a state of like pure love, light, and bliss. And so the way to connect with her the most impactfully was when I was in those states too. But she also didn't want to say that like I couldn't be sad, because that isn't even realistic. But just to like avoid the self-loathing as
Yeah.
much as possible at all costs, because that's like one of the most base frequencies, and it's really hard to get angel connection, mom help when I'm hating on myself
Self-hatred.
for being sad or
Yeah.
yeah. And so she said like to really work on, and why those meditative yoga, traveling nature places were really important, because they would get me into those states. And she talked about how the universe, I love this, is really about creation, and it's creative, and it's a creative force. And so the universe doesn't talk to us literally, it talks to us through just things lining up at the perfect synchronistic moments. That and that she also talked about how she could like channel through different creative energies like electricity, because we're electromagnetic beings, and how a bird is just a free flowing bird, and she can pair her creative energy with a bird's creative energy to like show up in my life at a certain perfect moment that I need a sign, and so the way that she spelled all that out just was like, this makes sense to me. It is a little woo woo, but it also like absolutely makes scientific sense to me, she talked about how we're all made of energy, and you cannot destroy energy. Science has proven you can't destroy energy. So when our body dies, our energy goes into this more this abyss,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
There's different levels of the abyss. But that she and Tony and that she gave me like songs, and she told me she'd stubbed my toe when I was like fucking up, which is really funny because I've had some big toe stubs at like the worst moments.
Wow.
Like I stubbed my toe in a rose quartz rock one day when I was just being a shit.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay,
Wow.
thanks.
And like she
Of course,
plays
it's a rose quartz rock too.
songs that she said that she would play, right?
Yeah,
Come
here
on,
comes
in the
the
most
sun.
striking moments, right?
Yeah, yeah,
What
totally.
what was it like
And
when
you have to, and the last thing I want to say too is like, she was a big Abraham person. Like,
like Abraham Hicks?
yeah, like she
Right.
didn't really listen to a lot of Abraham Hicks, but when I heard Abraham, and my mom's last name was Abraham,
Mhm.
um, I was like, this is totally how my mom taught me growing up. But she would talk about how you can't have an experience without being in relationship to something else, whether it's the weather or a friend or, your job, or you have to be in relation to something else. But that's the same thing that goes with someone in the afterlife. Like you can just grieve them, have the loss, and don't have a relationship with them in the afterlife. And they can still be there on the other side of the veil.
Yeah.
But you can also be in relationship to someone on the other side and get a lot of magic from it.
Right.
Isn't that like
that's amazing. I mean,
we don't think about that. We don't really we're not as a culture set up to think like that.
Yeah, and it's unusual that we don't have really, I mean, look at the Egyptians, right? You look at like most past cultures, there's elaborate structures that have to do with the afterlife and the relation, how it connects to this life. And we're actually, this culture is an anomaly historically, right? Involving that. But what has it been like for you when you have the moments where it's super clear? You're like, oh, because some of the ones that you described in the book are like, that was so clearly the odds of that song being played at that moment. Like, what is it like for you when you have one of those with your mom where it's like so clearly a song?
Oh my God. It's just such a big, I don't even want to say reminder. It's like a big smack in the face every time of how fucking magical. There is just some magical stuff that is going on, that mystery, it's just.
So it's like an evocation of one.
And it just forces you to surrender because it's just too mind-boggling to try to comprehend. And, but it's just, but you are the conductor. We get to conspire it. We really do. We can conjure up and invoke different things. I can invoke my mother and her spirit and say, I want to create a relationship with you. Or I can invoke, a relationship with the sun or more powerful celestial forces. I think most people are used to invoking relationships with the day-to-day, like the coffee person and my car but I think what I love to open people's minds to is that you can create these bigger relationships with really powerful forces, whether it's your loved one on the other side or a guide or Jesus or like I said, the sun and the moon are these amazing forces that we can actually channel energy from and with. And I know that again sounds woo-woo, and I hate sounding woo-woo because I really want people to think about it a different way.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a lot that we're leaving on the table with not and I've learned that firsthand through kind of going through this with my mom.
And the thing about, the thing I heard you emphasize in the book, and I can feel it coming through you now, right? Is that it's been having contact with that kind of those experiences are a function of the way that you've participated. You've really had to work hard. You've had to get up and listen to messages and that didn't make sense to you and carry them out and do that for 5 years with spaghetti, right? It's not a function of just something being handed to you. This is a function of you participating deeply, daily, like you talked about your practices. What's your morning routine now? An example.
I also feel like you have to give yourself permission to open up to deeper insights, even just with that, setting an intention, I'm just going to open myself up to be more receptive to deeper messages. And then setting up the container to have that listening is really important, because being in line at the grocery store and the car and the day-to-day world, it's a lot harder to get a clear signal to those deeper insights. Although sometimes I get my best ideas when I'm in traffic on Rose. But that said, the morning routine is, I get up every morning around 5. Now I was getting up at 3. And then I was finally like, this is absurd. But I get up at 5 and I and I have like, a whole routine, prayer and dry brushing, cold plunge, infrared, yoga. I
Yeah.
love it so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mantras.
Right.
But and what I feel like it does, any kind of spiritual practice at all, even just like 5 minutes of tuning in and just making choices, like I am going to invoke my highest potential today. I'm bringing creative forces in to open up and like allow me to spread these things throughout the day. Like just a simple prayer for 5 minutes. I feel like it puts like this silvery coating around you, around your energetic field, to your magnet. So to magnetize back to us
Right.
something different that day. I think it's just so, so, so important to start our day, my day specifically, with just like a powerful spiritual being put in place.
Totally. I noticed that you use a lot of sound and musical metaphors in describing your spiritual practice, which makes a lot of sense to me, because I'd say the word that would sum up everything that I'm hearing that you do for your practices is on some level about attunement, right? Being attuned, right? In some sense, attuning to the right chord, right, that you want to be at, that's appropriate for your life, right? And in that, being accorded in that way, being attuned to the world from that place, right? And being able to tune into the world from that place. And that's really, I can't emphasize enough the sweat that it takes to get up in the morning and do that, and what it took to come to those set of practices, and to have an ecology of practices like that, right?
Well, I would say that, like, I really believe this, like, thank you. And my mom said this. And so I've heard this in a bunch of books too. Like, and this makes so much sense to me. It takes about 40 days to rewire a process, a habit, a new way of thinking. And even if you just did a spiritual practice for 40 days and committed to it, and it can literally be as short as 5 minutes, but just laying down some intentions and groundwork for the day to attune yourself at a higher frequency than just not doing anything, you will know, like, and you notice such profound results, even just in the way that like your mind starts to like translate information differently. And then you just don't want to really stop doing.
You're setting
that.
Intentions. That's the big, and maybe I want to double click on that for a second, because you talk a lot, and your mom talked a lot about this idea of setting intentions as being really, really, really important. And in intentions, invoke and evoke something that wouldn't be invoked and evoked otherwise.
Yeah. And even like, that's why I do love the mantras, because those are even like subconscious intentions. It's like, there's like coded messages and the mantras that you're just flooding your subconscious with. That don't even have to be, it's just basically kind of tuning into something divine. And then intentions in general, like, I really like the analogy, and I think it was from my mom or from Oprah or both, of like how, our life is we're like in these little canoes going down the river, and our intention is really like how we're gonna ride the river. And if we didn't have any intention for how we could just, the river's just going to take us and have its way with us. And so the intentions, again, are about us creating the relationship with life in order to guide it and focus on what, and of course it does. That's why I also feel like our intentions have to stay general, because you can't say like, I intend to have the best interview ever with God, but like you can intend to be in a certain state, to invoke a certain feeling from people. But I think the intentions also, that you have to really have faith in them too. I feel like it's hard to make an intention that you're not 100% confident that you can But I think for me, my intentions are more like a state of being.
Right.
I really want to be
Right.
in a state of exploration. And that doesn't even mean like joy all the time either. It's more just like a state of receptivity and like
Yeah.
spreading creative magic. And
Right. Right. So it sounds like it's something like I keep getting this picture the way that you're talking about intentions, where it's like setting to think of like, well, if we imagine like the time is flowing towards us, right? And it goes from future to now to past. It seems like your intention does something like your intention that you set informs your dance with the future unfolding as it unfolds. It
yeah.
informs the dance with it. And I would
Yeah.
imagine on some level that we always have an intention, but there's automatic intentions that we have that can be really, really dark, that can be
Uh-huh.
really like not ones that we would choose. So just this practice of just being conscious about what intention you would choose if you would choose it. And then what I'm also hearing you say is like there's a practice of that you can get better and better at making intentions and having them be a thing that attunes you, right? And atones you in some sense, such that you can respond more intently, right, with the unfolding, if you will.
Yeah.
Does that sound?
Totally. I mean, I feel like I believe that we have four different systems that are important to like maintain balance and tend to.
Mm.
And I think often we just mostly tend to our physical system,
Yeah.
but we also have our mental, emotional, and spiritual system.
Yeah.
And I think if we tend to our spiritual system and nurture it, it's going to take care of the emotional and mental a little bit more. So if we're working on our physical and keeping ourselves healthy, and we're working on our spiritual system by doing the meditation and the morning routine and some intentions,
Yeah.
we should be good with our
Right.
four systems pending any like crazy doom in life. But yeah, I think it's really important. And then you just sort of get into the habit, like working out, where you have cellular memory and you just,
Yeah.
I can't not do my morning thing.
Yeah. I think that's
Even
really,
when I'm like,
really
I'm going to
interesting.
sleep in, I'm like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm like, it's like addicted. I'm
Yeah.
addicted to it.
Yeah. Because you just,
Especially
at this
women,
point,
huh?
you've done it long enough that your cells know,
Yeah. It's
right?
like,
What are
and
the,
the cold plunge is heinous. It's like the hardest thing to do, but it is so, I highly recommend
a
to
cold?
everybody that they take
Do you
a
do hot
3 minute
first and
cold
then cold, or do you
shower.
just go?
No, I take a 3 minute cold shower first, and I do dry brushing is like amazing for especially women because it kind of wakes up the lymphatic system.
Yeah.
And then the cold shower just takes away inflammation in the body and it just kind of resets your systems because it's so
Yeah.
violent.
Yeah. Totally.
And then I go down into the cold plunge, and that's 4 minutes that I do. And I do like a practice while I'm
Do
in
you do
there.
like
And it's
do you do
so
like any of
hard.
that deep breath, like deep, fast breathing
I
kind of?
don't do, I do like mantras in and out, and I
Wow.
visualize what I want to create
I
even
am
while I'm in
impressed.
there.
I am
And I'm
impressed.
like, I hate this so much. And then I go in the infrared sauna, which is my favorite part because I'm freezing.
Yeah.
And then I do like all these mantras and different things
That's
in
funny.
there. But yeah, it just, you start to get, it's so, so rewarding.
Yeah.
And really good for people that have had confusing, chaotic. I think, I don't know if you can relate to this, but like from having such an unstructured, dangerous childhood, I like to have control, structure, and routine in my life now. And I get really
Conscious ones.
squirrely if I don't have,
Yeah.
my routine. I'm not like a psychopath about it. Like I can go on vacation and not
Yeah.
have a cold plunge there.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I really,
When
I
you
think
went, yeah,
humans, huh?
I just felt a lot when you went, as you're talking about it, like it's almost like I felt like you just got in touch with how important it was to you. And I felt the center of yourself in some sense, like how meaningful and what these practices mean to you, right, on so many levels. And they're the difference that make the difference between being crazy and loopy and miserable and being attuned to your life, right, and having joy in your life and taking care of yourself, which is not something that you inherited early on. So it's stuff that you have to actually do. And I just felt the sacredness, right, that you touched into in that moment of that little moment where you closed your eyes. I just want to let you know that. Appreciated that.
It is sacred. Honestly, like if anyone ever wants to figure out their life and their problems and why is this happening to me, and you gotta go into the dark and sit with yourself in a quiet way.
Yeah.
And keep doing it because you'll figure it out way bigger, better, and more profound than trying to figure it out there.
Right. Totally.
But it's totally challenging sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no place that you could feel absolutely crazier than sitting with yourself, in silence and being like, okay, I'm going to be accountable right now and look in the mirror. And, self-awareness is like one of my favorite things to teach my kids.
Yeah, the truth seems the truth doesn't always taste good, but it's always the most nutritious thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that turning towards that's the message I'm getting from you is like essentially like turn toward the hardest thing in yourself. Take every opportunity to turn towards it and face it and be in the presence of it and look at it and try not to flinch, right? But just keep doing that. And that there's something transformative about just like something else will take over. It's what I'm hearing you say is like something that you can't even comprehend will take over. If you do your part, which is be willing to stay there as long as it takes. Be in the sense of the most agitating, agonizing, uncomfortable, boring, like monsters coming up place. If you stay present through that, unforeseeable things can be revealed through that. And if anything, at least you'll know, whatever it is, at least you'll know it's based on the truth because you've turned and faced the truth, right?
The best way through life is facing like every step of the way. You can't. And that's why like these morning practices are so vital and beautiful and important for people because it makes you face off in like, extremely challenging ways sometimes, but so rewarding on the other side because you just keep getting to know yourself better and the truth more, and then it's just so worth it. You can't run. You can't, there's no way to run from, but it's like so amazing because courage is really fun.
Yeah, totally.
It really can be so fun.
Totally. And it's like the other side of that, the beauty of things start to shine as having been self-evident, but unseen the whole time. And that beauty that shines right through those right after those experiences, when it breaks open and that light shines in, it's a light. This is what is my experience is like. It's not like a new light. It's like a realization of a light that's there. In fact, you find yourself in this light and there's something familiar about it and you realize it's always been there, right? I just haven't been able to see it or experience it. But now I realize, so it's like this healing in that moment, but it's also restorative to knowing that it had been there the whole past. You get that all in that one moment where it comes through, right? Beauty is, and I'm hearing this in you, like beauty is the underpinning of almost everything that you're saying and every part of like what you're wearing and the way that you're doing your hair and your rings and your background. Like I can feel how deep beauty is a partner here in all of this.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. And I feel like sometimes beauty and these goodies as well that we get spiritually, like from doing the practices and facing some of these things, are slowly blooming flowers too. It's not like you just intend one day, oh, I'm going to open myself up to see so much beauty, you know, and then the whole day it's like you see a hummingbird and you're like, why am I not caring about this hummingbird? But it doesn't really work like that. It's like an amazing like blooming process where suddenly one day on day 37, you just have this like crazy surge of love energy, like fill up your heart from nowhere because that, you know, you see like a smiling woman walking across the street. And so it's really important to be patient, I feel like, with these spiritual practices, and also not bite off more than one can chew, because just doing like setting up just a small amount of space every day, and committing for 40 days, knowing you could do that, is like, that's where the real magic kind of blooming, and it's a slow burn.
Yeah.
But yeah, beauty, I'm like really funny like that with my family too. And I think it's a gift to just make like the candles burn at twilight, or the flowers, keep them out. And, you know, I really love I didn't have that. So I love giving that.
Yeah.
Just a beautiful ambient.
It really comes through in you. And I just wanted to ask you, what's it been like and what is it like now being a parent?
You know, I love being a mom, is my absolute favorite role. I'm obsessed and in love with my kids.
When your son,
But
I just want to say, when your son came in, I was like, oh, it's not even a question whether or not it's okay.
Oh,
like we were talking about with us, it's like that became a big question mark for us. Like, ultimately, is it okay, you know, in our darkest moments? He walked down like, oh yeah, there's no question for him. He doesn't even have to think about
it. Yeah. And that is like, thank you, because I want my kids to like, my biggest things to always make them feel safe.
Yeah.
And that we're always there for them, and that they can trust us. Yeah. And also that it's fun and light, and that they're free. Like, we're free spirits. Obviously, I don't want the kids, and Dylan's my biggest challenge because he's wild and he's like a WWE wrestler wannabe, which is my karma. I'm always like, that's my karma, you know, because he just, all he wants to do is talk about WWE all the time, which I really tried to avoid for many years with him. But anyway, yeah, I just feel like we should let kids be free as much as they can with the guardrails, so that they feel like they know how and who they want to be when it's time to figure that out. And they're like, oh, I'm this, you know, not this confined, restricted, rebel. Even I turned into a rebel. I was like, peace out. And I definitely don't want that to happen.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, those guardrails, but that letting them feel as if there's no guardrails, right? Like giving them the experience of them being on their own and like finding out who they are through the world, and like being right there to catch them, right?
Yeah.
That whole sense, right?
And not shaming kids. Like, shaming is deadly.
Yeah.
Like, I was shamed, and I hated myself for like many, many years from that program. So if ever I could feel if I've shamed my kids, and I'm like, okay, let's reframe that. Like, I'm so empathic to when they feel shamed. And so that's something I really try to avoid. So the conversation can be different with kids if they're jumping all over the couch or trying to wrestle their sister. Instead of just freaking out and saying no. And, I really do try to have conversations with the
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I guess they're in charge is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. They're creatures you got to negotiate with them. Right.
Yeah.
But I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, that's, when I had my first kid, I felt like me and my wife knew everything from our experience, what not to do. We weren't exactly sure what to do. Right. But the one thing I was clear on is just don't shame them. And like constantly, and we did a really good job with that. And it's so funny because that he grew up to be this, he's fascinating to me. Like I study him, right? He's like, Forrest has grown up to be this, he just walks around as if he has the implicit right to exist. Let's not even question. And I'm like, how did that happen? Like, I think part of how that happened, if you don't shame them, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's called
Quiet
parental
confidence, this unapologetic sense of
thing.
just a quiet being here. Like, let's talk to people, super
Regulation.
coordinated. Yeah. All of that stuff. And I think that really making that distinction between what they do and who they are and making sure that you're not collapsing those two, right?
Mhm.
Is an art
It's
and a
really
challenge.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has been so good getting to know you.
Thank you so much. This has definitely been vulnerable and just really lovely and delightful. I think you're an amazing human being, and I'm excited because I feel like we have a lifelong and beyond friendship in store for us. And I just totally connected with you on our original chat, and I just so value your feedback and your incredible questions that
Mm,
move people to deeper places within themselves, which is just like, what's the point of doing this without going to those places? Like, we're here, we gotta just dig in there.
exactly.
And so I just really appreciate the depths to
Mhm.
which you travel. And I can't wait to go, to deeper places and talk about all these incredible things together.
Oh yeah. Yeah, let's have another conversation. Dive deep into
Okay,
this.
I would love
Yeah, I
it.
love that. I love that. So good getting to know you, and I'm just glad that this is a start. And I appreciate, and I could feel that throughout, that there were certain moments where it's like, ooh, vulnerable, like literally your disclosure around these things, and that you're just starting to talk at this level is a vulnerability, right? And that you're doing it proactively and consciously and that's the key. I think I would say, of your writing, that's the thing that came through. I would say for me, that that book is a function of your vulnerability.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's what's saying through the whole thing now that I think about it. Yeah.
Mm.
Hope.
Yeah, thank you.
Yay. Bye bye.
Mwah. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful